chance this lens was probably used in one of those GCA MAN 4800 wafer steppers that I mentioned at the very beginning of the video. It's impossible to know exactly, but this lens was used in those machines, and I think Zeiss made them specifically for that machine at the time. The mask is held by a printed component attached to an XYZ positioner. This will let me adjust the mask by small amounts if I need to for alignment purposes, and the positioner itself has a magnetic base, so it clamps onto a steel bracket which is attached to the back of the enclosure. The light source slides back and forth along these two steel rods. The red alignment light goes on the left, and the ultraviolet light goes on the right. But let's talk about that light source for a moment, because it's a surprisingly tricky topic. In a perfect world, we would have 100% collimated light passing straight through the mask, and it would be generated from an infinitely small point source. Traditional light sources were typically mercury or xenon lamps, filtered to remove all of the non-ultraviolet components. The output was then collected and synchronized and recollimated through a series of light sources. A more modern option is to use an array or a matrix of LEDs. The problem with this is that the best way to do it is to put a single lens on every single LED. I decided to this paper, a stack of thin film light modifiers to generate a quad. First in the stack is a diffuser to help light. The glass that was in my UV lamp, I just hit it with some sandpaper to make a Next up are two enhancing films. These are plastic films with little pyramid shapes, and due to internal reflections, light mostly escapes in the forward direction. The rest of the light bounces around and is cycled until it finds a way out. So it's a way to enhance the light output in kind of a horizontal direction. Some of the light still escapes at more extreme angles than we'd like. So on top of that are two orthogonal layers of privacy film. This is like the stuff you put on your laptop to keep people from looking at your screen on an airplane. So they restrict the amount of light going off axis. And it's basically a clear plastic with thin vertical strips of black plastic inside in kind of like a grading pattern. And so light that's going straight escapes just fine, but light that's going at an angle will hit those. The final result is a beam of light that is mostly, it's kind of hard to capture on camera, but there's very little light coming from any of the sides, and most of it is traveling forward. The point to this is that you lose a lot of light going through the stack of modifiers. I don't know that say each one is 80%, 85% transparent. That's a lot of light that gets lost when you have 5 of them stacked on top of each other. So remains to be seen if this will work well or not. I'm cautiously optimistic. Worst case, we can use it for longer if we need to. Finally, there is a beam splitter that sits on top of the lens, and a camera to focus and align them. From the state of chaos here and the lack of fully assembled machine, things haven't gone to plan. The long and short of it is that I had originally that came with the camera. This is like a small compact zoom lens, and from initial testing, I thought it would be okay to provide the alignment through the beam splitter. It's not. It doesn't work. There's just no way to make it work given the current arrangement, or probably ever. It was just a bad idea. I tried a variety of different optics that I have sitting around. You know, I've got a bunch of different stuff in my parts bin, and I found a few arrangements that would maybe work with this particular setup, but it wasn't ideal, and really I should just stop wasting time and redesign all this and do it again. Okay, so here's the new revision. Obviously, it's all in metal now, which is, just makes everything easier. But there are a few distinct changes from before, mostly around adjustability. So you can see that the bottom stage where the wafer goes, or the substrate, has gained 2 more stages. So now this is an X, Y, Z, theta stage. The lens is directly above it. And then we see up here the alignment optics setup. We have the beam splitter, which sits on top of the lens using still just a 3D printed mount. I don't love this. It doesn't fit very well. So I'll probably replace this at some point, but it's okay enough for now. We'll take the light, bounce it into the alignment optics that go into the camera in the back. And you can see that that is just a microscope that used in reverse.
Ah, wir müssen diesen Namen alle.
But it's not quite enough. Luckily, microscope objectives usually have a part of the housing that comes off. Sometimes it's the whole thing, sometimes like this one is just the front half. Take that off. You can see now it's much thinner, this diameter, and that actually will allow it to go inside of that bore and get us into our critical focus. There, if I remember correctly. Here's how it works. Super simple. We take a mask and we put it in the mask tray. This is a test mask that I made with my fiber laser a couple months ago, so the features are familiar, but it'll be fine for alignment purposes. Next, we bring the substrate and the mask into focus using the red light. If there's an existing layer, we would also align it to the mask at this step. Then we switch on the ultraviolet light and let it expose. And that's it. It's super easy. With that tentatively working, we need to go back to the masking system and make a mask. For mask substrates, I'm using these large plates of glass coated with about 100 nanometers of copper. That's thick enough that you can't see light through it, so it's opaque, but the copper dissolves easily in ferric chloride, so it just makes processing easier later. On my third attempt, I got something approaching halfway decent, and it's certainly good enough to test with to start. If we look at the mask under the microscope, we can see a few issues that we'll need to correct in the future. The stage is holding great positioning accuracy, because it has those, 1 nanometer encoders on it. But there are still some misalignments if you look closely, and this is actually due to a rotation in the optical system. It used to be a whole lot worse, but I applied some rotational calibration, and now it's just slightly off. But we can see that each field is rotated ever so slightly, causing a mismatch between bad enough for me to worry about at this point. You can also see those in the corners. This is from uneven exposure. There's a bit of tip optics, and so the corner is the light is a little more diffuse in that area, and it doesn't expose quite as quickly. And ultimately, when it gets developed, it doesn't develop as quickly either. And more generally, I just didn't develop long enough, so this whole central region isn't quite clear. And it's kind of like foggy because there's still copper left over. I miscalculated my pixel to micron scale, and so I think this line is probably going to end up about 2 or 3 microns rather than it turned out really well. I do notice there's a bit of fall off on the edges where probably the light intensity isn't quite as uniform as it is in the middle. That's something we might need to fix, but we can also maybe just fix that with longer exposures. I don't know, that's a TBD. It definitely looks promising, so let's go make a newer, better and try this all again. The system is not working anymore. I can't get this by system. It gets kind of stuck during the boot phase, and it took me a while to figure out, but I think it's because the UV LEDs are dead. They died somehow. I don't know why. This power cable goes to the LEDs, and this goes to the blue channel, which is the UV channel. And if we check them both with a diode test, shows 0.6 volts in one direction and 0 volts in the opposite direction, which is what you'd expect from a diode. So that's good. And if we check the blue LED, or the UV LED rather, we get 0.071 volts one way and 0.71 volts the other way. So that's cool. Basically, what I understand, I don't know electrical engineering, but I think that means the diodes are shorted open because we were seeing a voltage. But unfortunately, the UV LED is way up. machines, a maskless photolithography stepper, and a 10-to-1 reduction system. And we now have the ability to build features on par with 1980, which you can do a lot with that. There's a lot of really cool chips out there from that time period. Big thanks to Sencut Sen for sponsoring this video. Funnily enough, I'd actually ordered all the sheet metal parts with my own money.
Von die Scheiße,
It just
Alter.
seemed like the right
Haben sie
approach for
das
this kind of
Game
project.
kaputt gemacht? Haben sie das Game zerstört, Alter? Mit dem scheiß Update, Alter.
So I reached out to them and, well, here we are.
Komplett zerstörtes Game, Alter. Was haben sie nur gemacht, Alter? Welcher Idiot hat das gemacht, Alter? Siehst du, überall fick Idioten, Alter. Sogar hier Idioten. Überall fick Idioten, Alter. Jede Fickstelle Idiot hockt, Alter. Fick Scheiße wie die Pest vermehrt, Alter.
But I'm more than happy to have Sencut Sen do it for me, and it was quick and easy to get the parts. I don't think I really want to deal with the logistics of quarter-inch thick sheets of steel anyway.
Auch hier Idioten, Alter. Stürzt ständig ab wie Scheiße, Alter.
And nearly $700.
Ja, Mann.
Plus probably like twice
Also,
that in freight
servus.
fees. So